Please. Now, I am inviting our second speaker of our conference, Professor Padma V. Devarajan. So, Madam is actually Dean, Research and Innovation. Madam is a professor in pharmacy and former head, Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences and Technology at Institute of Chemical Technology, Mumbai. She is also a member of the Board of Governors, President of the Innovation Council, and in charge of the World Bank Technical Education Quality Improvement Program, that is TEQIP, at the ICT Mumbai, the only elite university and center of excellence in the state of Maharashtra in India. His research interests include colloidal carriers for targeted drug delivery in cancer and infectious diseases, veterinary drug delivery, bio-enhancement strategies, mucosal drug delivery systems as alternate to parenteral administration, and quality by design in drug development. He has over 100 publications and presentations in cited journals and national or international conferences, and over 15 book chapters in the area of drug delivery. Her books on targeted drug delivery concept and strategies and targeted intracellular delivery by receptor-mediated endocytosis, published by Springer, won Professor K.N. Kamath Book Award at ICT Mumbai. She has filed many patents of international or national, has 8 patents granted, 6 patents are technologies licensed, and 2 technologies has been commercialized. His research is funded through a number of grants from the government and the industry, including companies from Japan, Germany, and USA. He is also a consultant to various pharmaceutical industries in India and abroad. He was a board member of the Board of Scientific Advisors, and chair of the Young Scientist Mentor, that is Protect Committee of the Controlled Release Society, INC USA, and chair of the Outstanding Paper Award Committee of the journal Drug Development and Transnational Research of the CRS, INC USA. She is a patron member of the Controlled Release Society, Indian chapter, and member on the editorial board of the Asian Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences and the European Journal of Drug Metabolism and Pharmacokinetics. He is the vice president of the Society for Pharmaceutical Dissolution Science and was earlier the chair scientific program of SPDS. She is also the first woman president of the Alumni Association of UDCT or ICT Mumbai. Professor Devarajan is a gold medalist of Mumbai University at BPharm, a nominated fellow of the Maharashtra Academy of Science, a recipient of the American Association of Indian Pharmaceutical Scientists Distinguished Educator and Research Award in the year 2011, the Vasvik Award for the Industrial Research to Women in 2011, and the Association of Pharmaceutical Teachers of India Professor C.J. Shishu Award for Research in Pharmaceutical Sciences. Her publication in the International Journal of Pharmaceutics on gastroretentive drug delivery won the prestigious Utrajit Award 2015. She won the Bengaluru Nano Innovation Award for a nanosystem developed for veterinary infections, the IPA-ACG SciTech Award for Innovation in Solid Dosage Form, and the OPPI Scientist Award in the year 2018. Her most recent award is the Punjab Rao Deshmukh Outstanding Women Scientist Award 2019, which has been awarded by the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, Government of India, New Delhi. So with this nice introduction, now we are welcoming Professor Padma V. Devarajan to deliver his lecture. Yeah, please, madam. Now I am handing over to madam, please.
Thank you very much. And please confirm that I am audible.
Yes, madam. You are audible.
Yeah, thank you so much for this invitation, and I'd like to thank the principal, Professor Jadhav, and also Dr. Anil Jindal for having contacted me and inviting me to participate in this international symposium. Shall I start my presentation? Can I do it?
Yes, madam, please.
Madam, Madam, on right hand corner, on the right hand bottom, yes.
Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am, we can see.
Yeah,
Please go.
okay. So thank you very much. So as it is shown in the program schedule, I am scheduled to talk on brain-targeted nano-delivery system for neurocysticercosis. The word itself is quite a tongue twister, but very important. It's a neglected infectious disease. And this is a disease that afflicts the brain and not really known. So I always like to start my presentation with a quote from the management guru Shiv Khera, who says you can win because winners don't do different things, they do things differently. And that's what differentiates a winner from a loser. So because we are in the innovation age today, I extrapolate this to innovation and I say innovators don't see different things, they see things differently. So they see the same things differently, and when they do that, they find opportunity. And today what I am going to talk about is an opportunity like this that was seen by my student, now Dr. Rajshri Shinde, who's doing extremely well with Abitech. And I'm going to present the story of her passion and commitment as she did her PhD. Her subject was brain delivery for cancer, and we had started off with using curcumin as one of the molecules which we wanted to explore. And then we wanted to put it with an anti-cancer drug to look for synergy. While working on this, she came across a patient of neurocysticercosis, and she saw that patient suffering. And she came back to me and said, this also is a brain disease, so can we work on that? And that's where the entire story began. And I will take you through the story where we got some very good results for this particular infection, neurocysticercosis. So what is neurocysticercosis? It is actually an infection of the tapeworm. And we all assume that the tapeworm is something that infects only the gastrointestinal tract and remains stuck there forever. But it is not like that. This infection called neurocysticercosis is caused by the cystic larvae of Taenia solium, which is the tapeworm which you see here. And this is the Cysticercus cellulose, which is a larval stage. And this is how it can infect the brain. You can see it's quite a deep-rooted brain infection, and it can be very, very detrimental for the patient. It can trigger epilepsy, and it can even trigger paralysis. So that is where there's a huge danger, because people get uncontrolled convulsions and paralysis strikes you. It can really affect your entire life after that. So it's a serious disease, but yet for some reason, it's a neglected disease. And here I say zoonotic. Zoonotic because it is a disease that comes to humans from animals. So it's serious, it's neglected, it's zoonotic. All three reasons why there is a very urgent need to come up with a good treatment for NCC. Is it localized? No, it's distributed quite across the world. You will see here South America, some parts of North America, quite a bit of Africa. But you will also see that Asia, and particularly India, is one of the regions where this disease is very, very predominant. And where you see it as red, it means it's endemic in these countries. In other cases, it's lower and it's normally coming from other countries and suspected endemic in these green countries. So India lies here. So this is very, very important for India. And this is taken from WHO. So it's very authentic. How does man get this infection? Or I should say human. How does a human get this infection? It is obtained through uncooked food, particularly pork, which is pig meat. So what happens is it's eaten It is thrown out through the feces. It can then infect agricultural products like vegetables, etc., which are consumed, and the cysticerci which develop in the milk, in the muscle of the pig, are taken up also when meat is eaten, and these can go to the brain. But brain is not the only place where you have cysticercosis, but when it's in the brain, you call it neurocysticercosis. But basically, it comes through pig meat, or it could also come when it reaches the feces through other sources, which may not be the pig meat, so it can affect vegetarians, but it would more significantly affect the pork eaters. And this is the cyst, the transparent T-solium cyst, which looks like a small seed, but it has 4 suckers and hooklets inside the bladder. So these suckers and hooklets are inside the bladder, and once in vivo, it evaginates and then starts growing. So this is where the challenge is, and in this state, it can move throughout the body and cross barriers, including the blood-brain barrier, which is the biggest challenge. So you have 3 types of cysticercosis: the subcutaneous, the ocular, and the brain type, which I will show you pictorially. So this is a subcutaneous, which can affect the limbs, the back, the arms. It can affect the tongue, the stomach. See here, it can even affect the eye and cause visual disturbances also at times if it is anywhere near the lens or the retina. And this is the brain type, which can really infect the brain. And with this kind of infection, epilepsy is the most frequent symptom, which could lead to paralysis depending on where in the brain the tapeworm starts growing uncontrolled. And when in the brain, we call it neurocysticercosis, and that is what we are going to address today, not the other forms of cysticercosis. Now, what is the current therapy for neurocysticercosis? It's albendazole with corticosteroids. And you see here long term, which is almost 1 year, which is today even longer than tuberculosis therapy. Now, steroids we know are associated with hosts of side effects, particularly when they are taken long term. And albendazole exhibits variable and low oral bioavailability and requires high doses, almost 400 milligram, and it's only about 5 to 10% bioavailable. So you have poor bioavailability. You also have drug delivery limited by the blood-brain barrier because it cannot cross the BBB, and again relatively slow and very slow cure rate, and low because the cure rates are not assured as on date. And the speed, which is almost 1 year, is again a very, very huge challenge. Now, how does albendazole work? Albendazole, through CYP enzymes, is converted to albendazole sulfoxide. So albendazole typically is not a typical drug, it's a prodrug. But this drug converts to the prodrug, which is the effective form, and this prodrug to drug conversion takes place in the liver and intestine. So one of the major routes for blood-brain delivery, the nasal route, does not have these CYP enzymes, so we cannot deliver albendazole. So then this became a challenge for us, and we came up with this new combination. We said, why not deliver the sulfoxide itself? Because albendazole has poor bioavailability, 5 to 10%. So I need to deliver small quantities of sulfoxide to match large quantities of albendazole. And we tried to replace, since we were already working on curcumin, we said we will use curcumin as a safe anti-inflammatory instead of the steroids. And with this combination, we hope for a possible short-term therapy, which would be very, very advantageous for the patient. But now this needs to be delivered to the brain, and the greatest challenge in brain delivery is the blood-brain barrier, as all of us are aware. So how does one cross the blood-brain barrier to reach the brain? The blood-brain barrier could be considered analogous to a huge mountain range, because that's how strong a barrier it is, and that's why we are protected and our brains remain safe in most of us throughout our life. So you can either have a mountain pass that goes through the mountain range, that's one strategy, or you can have a helicopter that would just go across. So in our study, we have looked at both these strategies. I'll call it the helicopter strategy and the mountain pass strategy. And what are we trying to cross in the in vivo situation? Because that was a simile showing the mountains and the pass. But what we are trying to cross is this endothelial barrier, because it has these tight junctions, which you can see expanded here. These tight junctions are what form a major protection of the brain so that nothing can penetrate through the endothelium and enter the brain. Of course, you have additional, the basement membrane and the astrocyte foot processes also, but the tight junctions are very, very critical in preventing transport of any unwanted molecules into the brain. But despite that, the larval stage of Cysticercus is able to go into the brain. So you have different strategies to enhance brain concentration. One is passive diffusion, just try, and that's what is done with conventional therapy. It relies on passive diffusion of albendazole in the sulfoxide form and corticosteroids into the brain. So you give huge concentrations and drug the body to assure that something reaches the brain. You could disrupt the blood-brain barrier using penetration enhancers or some other kind of strategy. You could also look at overcoming efflux transporters, which throw out the drug that's gone in. And the fourth strategy is the active targeting strategy, where you could use ligands like this, which have specific affinity for the target. So what have we looked at? This is a schematic of the blood-brain barrier, and we're looking at nasal delivery, which I would like to call as the helicopter delivery. And then three other routes, the transcellular, which is passive diffusion, which is likely to occur through any dosage form, but very limited. The receptor-mediated transcytosis is what I would call the mountain pass strategy, because this can take in quite a bit of nanosystems into the cells and help it cross the blood-brain barrier. And of course, you have cell-mediated transcytosis, particularly of nanosystems, which is possible. But among these three, which could also totally be called the mountain pass strategy, this is going to be the more critical. So the focus in the study is on nasal delivery on one hand and receptor-mediated transcytosis or endocytosis. We call it transcytosis because it's going through the barrier into the brain. So this is what we are using to circumvent the blood-brain barrier. So the nasal delivery or nose-to-brain delivery occurs via the olfactory pathway, where you directly bypass the blood-brain barrier like the helicopter, and also the trigeminal nerve allows penetration into the brain. In addition, there could be some amount that comes in based on what is systemically absorbed. The other route is receptor-mediated transcytosis, and we know that we need a ligand for receptor-mediated transcytosis. So what have we used as ligand? We have used DHA or docosahexaenoic acid for traversing the blood-brain barrier. Now, why did we select DHA? Now, the blood-brain barrier has this LPC receptor, which is a lysophosphatidyl-choline receptor for transport of DHA. And DHA can therefore cross the blood-brain barrier via the DHA receptors or the LPC receptors, which have affinity for DHA. They're also called DHA receptors commonly. And therefore, it was our hypothesis that DHA could enable receptor-mediated transcytosis. And therefore, we selected DHA. Other added benefits obtained when we selected DHA was the brain nutrient feature of DHA and its other possible therapeutic effects like an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory and immunomodulation, anti-cancer agent, reduction of oxidative stress, and also acting as an anti-anxiolytic, but other reasons or other benefits that could be obtained. But this certainly is a good benefit when there's an infection in the brain. Where you target with DHA, you also provide a nutrient to the brain, which is a very, very major advantage. And yes, to some extent, the anti-inflammatory could also help because this infection is associated with a lot of inflammation because it's aggressive. And that's why corticosteroids are given. So what did we come up with? We came up with a microemulsion for neurocysticercosis of albendazole sulfoxide and curcumin. This is a novel combination and we put it into a lipidic formulation. And right enough, this microemulsion contained DHA oil or DHA-rich oil. Now we found that a microemulsion prepared with a DHA-rich oil was very difficult and we could hardly incorporate any oil into the microemulsion. And therefore, we combined DHA with another monoglyceride, which is Capmol MCM. And in fact, it is this study which utilized one of the Abitech ingredients, Capmol MCM, which got the student a fantastic job in that company also. So this is very relevant for students. Your PhD work can take you through very easily if you're lucky. So we prepared a microemulsion with Capmol and we prepared with Capmol and we replaced Capmol with DHA because DHA is a long chain triglyceride and therefore it is very difficult to microemulsify. So we had to go for 50-50. And we looked at two routes of administration, the intravenous route and the intranasal route. Now, why did we look at the intravenous route? Because we said this is a long-term infection. Via the nasal route, it may not be possible to give delivery for more than, say, maybe a month. But suppose you need it beyond that, and that could be unsafe for the nasal mucosa. And therefore, we said we must look at intravenous also. And therefore, the microemulsion we prepared comprised of excipients which could be administered by both routes of administration. So we put that as a factor during development so that the same microemulsion could be used by both the routes. We didn't have two different preparations. I'm just going to show you some data to show you we've characterized it enough to substantiate what we got in our studies. So the TM showed less than 20 nanometer globule size and the SAN study confirmed that what we had was a microemulsion. We also looked at the viscosity and found a reasonably acceptable viscosity in the range of 175 CPS. Surprisingly, we found that the mucoadhesion, although no bioadhesive polymer was included, was also mucoadhesive. This microemulsion was mucoadhesive, and this is a very positive point because then it could adhere to the olfactory region long enough to allow sustained release. And we actually saw that. Now we did a basic preliminary permeation through nasal mucosa, and we saw that while the drug, that is ABZSO and curcumin, showed minimal permeation, the microemulsion showed higher permeation. And the dotted line is only Capmol, and this dark line is Capmol DHA-ME. So we'll be calling that as DHA-ME and the other is Capmol-ME. So Capmol was lower than DHA and DHA gave significantly higher permeation of both drugs. So this told us that there is a lot of promise for nasal delivery of this formulation. Since we were also looking at intravenous, we did the hemolytic study and we saw less than 10% hemolysis. This is the control, which is just water. And we looked at the change in size in serum over a period of 6 hours. And you can see here the size, I said less than 20 by TEM, and it matches here. We're getting a maximum about 16 and somewhere 12 to 16, which is very, very good, good stability. And together the size and the hemolytic study tells us that this is also safe for intravenous administration. So So I will take you straight away now to the in vivo study, the most exciting part of the study, and not take you through the development of the microemulsion. So we had the drug solutions as reference. We had the Capmol-ME without DHA because we wanted to see whether DHA as targeting ligand actually works. And then we had the DHA, Capmol 50/50, which is called the DHA-AMI. And we had the intranasal or intravenous administration. And the dose of curcumin to ABZ was in the ratio 1 ABZSO to 5 curcumin. And the volume was 50 microliter intranasal. And for IV, we had to treat it with PBS and then administer IV because it was too viscous for a direct IV injection. The data. This is the plasma intranasal administration of the microemulsion, and we are quantifying both the drugs. ABZSO is this, these two graphs here. An intranasal route is above and intravenous is below. So the intranasal route, if you see, the value here is barely 200 nanogram per ml in the plasma. And for curcumin, it's even lower than 50. And if you look at the intravenous, you'll see that here itself it's 500. So it's a very high value that you have in plasma. And then it slowly goes down. But even at this point of time, say 8 hours, it's about more than 100, which is significantly higher than the intranasal route. So we see similar behavior for both drugs, ABZSO and curcumin, which tells us clearly the route systemic exposure is very low, which means it has gone to the tissues. So it's rapidly distributed to the tissues. Of course, we are looking at the brain tissue, but then at this point, we can only say that tissue distribution is rapid and hence plasma levels are very low with intranasal compared with intravenous. The next was the brain pharmacokinetics. Again, intranasal versus intravenous. So the above two graphs show intranasal for ABZSO and curcumin, and this shows intravenous for ABZSO and curcumin. So now let us see here. In case of the brain, see the value here. It's almost 4,000 and odd. Okay, nanogram per gram of the tissue, because here we are not taking a fluid, we are taking brain tissue. So it's nanogram per gram, and the same introduced intravenously gives me at maximum 400 nanogram per gram. And if you look at these formulations, that is the DHA, ME, the Capmol-ME and the plain drug, even the Capmol-ME at 24 hours is giving more than 400 nanogram per gram. So it's much better than the intravenous. So we're getting very, very high values. Coming to curcumin, we see similar data. So while with DHA, we are seeing a 20.4-fold increase in the AUC compared to the drug solution. We are seeing a 7.1-fold increase compared to Capmol-ME. So this tells us that DHA is certainly taking it in higher concentration to the brain. We saw similar for curcumin, but the enhancement for curcumin was seen to be lower. But for us, this was more important because the drug was basically ABZSO and curcumin was only the supplementary anti-inflammatory. So this did not bother us, but what was exciting is that even curcumin showed higher values with DHA-ME, which were 5.1-fold enhancement over plain curcumin. And if you look at intravenous, just like you saw for ABZSO, here the value is almost 400, and here it is just much less than 200 also at maximum. So what we see is we are getting high, what we are seeing is very high brain uptake when we give nasal route of administration, and we are also seeing prolonged release, which is very, very important. In case of intravenous, again, this is important because we are seeing slower and lower brain uptake compared to this. But look at this brain uptake. It's almost 400 compared to the plain drug, which is less than 100. So which means a fourfold enhancement, which suggests that if I cannot give it nasally for a long time, I can rely on intravenous also, and maybe try and match, first build up the levels with intranasal and then keep giving a bolus of intranasal and adjust. Of course, all those things involve a lot more studies, but these are all things that we can hypothesize. So this data also, although lower than nasal, is very, very promising compared to the plain drug for both albendazole here and for curcumin here. Now we are looking at biodistribution, because we saw that the pharmacokinetics plasma was low, but yes, we saw brain values are high. But then what about other organs? So where has it gone elsewhere? So when I looked at ABZSO intravenous at 3 time points, 0.5, 8 and 24 hours, what am I seeing here? The brain, the lung, the spleen, the heart, the kidney, the liver. So I see significantly lower concentration in the brain compared to others, but certainly we don't want liver-like concentrations in the brain. Importantly, you see that the DHA-ME is giving me higher concentration than the other two. And in case of at 8 hours, you still see some of this in the brain, and you see all concentrations going down. So a lot of rapid elimination from the liver because the drug is metabolized in the liver. And even at 24 hours, while you see some amount in the liver, in the kidney, in the heart, of all the 3 formulations administered, in case of the brain, you don't see the plain drug at all. But you see the DHA capmol very faintly, and you see the DHA-ME. Sorry, here you see capmol-ME very faintly, but DHA-ME you are seeing, suggesting that you have enhanced brain uptake and sustained brain retention of ABZO following even intravenous. And again, this is intravenous, different time points for curcumin. So I'll take you straight to 24-hour here and show you that curcumin is not there plain, but the capmol-ME and the DHA-ME do show curcumin, and in case of the other organs, all the 3 formulations show retention of the drug. But in the brain, you see that just plain capmol is totally absent. It was not detectable, so even if it's there, it's at very, very low concentration. And then look at this intranasal administration. In case of intranasal administration, right at 0.5 hours, we saw high brain uptake, which I showed you, but uptake in the other organs, can you see, is so much lower than when we saw IV. So which really tells you that a lot of drug is going to the brain. It is sustained and it remains in the brain, and it is seen at relatively high concentration. And even at 24-hour, you're seeing almost 1000 nanogram per ml, which is more than the peak that you get with IV. So you have real huge concentrations in the brain, remaining in the brain. So you may not need to give a dose every day. Maybe you can give a dose alternate day. So these are all presumptions based on preclinical studies, which of course need very judicious and properly planned studies for taking it further. And this is the same for curcumin. So here again, very high concentration. The concentration in other organs is slightly higher because we saw that curcumin levels in the brain were not as high as albendazole sulfoxide. So you're seeing that by an increase here. So which means it tells us that the mass balance is very good. And then at 24 hours, we are again seeing relatively high brain concentrations of curcumin, almost 100 nanogram, which is kind of a little 50% of the peak by IV route for curcumin. So here, what we find is that the tissue distribution in the organs was significantly lower following nasal administration compared to IV, while the brain distribution was much, much higher. So this is a comparison of ABZSO curcumin ME by IV and nasal. So this is by the IV route. So I will just tell you, the blue is the control, that is plain drug. Capmol ME is red, DHA Capmol ME, that is DHA ME is green. So you can see a high concentration Cmax at 1 hour of 350 nanogram per gram, and this is by IV. But come to here, the scales are not the same, so the values are different. So please don't go by the scale. Here, go by this value. Here at 0.5 hours, which means rapid absorption, following the nasal route. So at 0.5 hours, we are getting 4560 nanogram per gram. Sorry, it's not ml. Nanogram per gram, which means it is more than 10 times what you're getting as maxima by IV route. Similarly, here it is 148 at 1 hour, and here it's at 0.5, it's 400. So it's about 3 times. But here, look at this. The actual active is 10 times. And this shows us the AZSO brain concentration intravenous versus intranasal. So if you look at this is at 0.5 hours and 24 hours. And you can see that if this is a drug solution, this is intravenous and intranasal. You get a 4-fold enhancement with the microemulsion with the drug solution. With Capmol, you get 20-fold, and with the DHA ME, you're getting a 24.28-fold enhancement. And at 24 hours, also a 13 or 14-fold enhancement, which says that we have sustained drug concentration up to 24 hours. And at 24 hours, ABZSO not detected from the drug solution. See here, it's not detected at all. So what we have achieved here is very high brain concentration. So this is the same thing for ABZSO and curcumin. This is the brain AUC. So that was the concentration. This is AUC. That means we are mapping the 24 hours. And we can take a look straight here. The DHA ME gives you a 10-fold enhancement in AUC. The Capmol gives you 11-fold enhancement vis-a-vis Capmol as reference, but not vis-a-vis drug. If I take this as reference, then this is certainly much higher than this. So here we are comparing these two, and therefore this is little higher. But if you look at it, this is going to be much, much higher. Similarly, here also we are getting a significantly high and sustained brain concentration. And very important, intravenous ABZSO curcumin also exhibits significant levels of the drugs. And our study also suggests important role of DHA in enhancing brain uptake. We then calculated the nose-to-brain transport using the standard parameters, drug targeting efficiency, and DTP, that is direct nose-to-brain transport. And here you can see that the levels for the ABZSO curcumin DHA ME are much, much higher than the control, that is the drug solutions and the Capmol ME, suggesting that DHA is a value-added component, and as we are proposing, something that's enabling targeting to the brain. This is just one picture which we took to show that actually what we are seeing by quantification, we are also seeing in actuality. So this is the curcumin to the DHA ME. You can see the concentration much higher compared to the plain drug and Capmol ME. This is at 0.5 hours and this is at 1 hour, and these are brain sections. These are brain sections. So this data was published. This was only curcumin because curcumin is fluorescent and DHA albendazole sulfoxide is not fluorescent. So it was the same composition with only curcumin, and this is published in Drug Delivery in the 2017 issue. So what was our hypothesis? DHA-mediated transport occurs through the fatty acid binding lipoprotein carriers. It can also enable fluidity of cell membranes. The small globule size of the ME enables bypass of the RES, and therefore even by the IV route, it is allowing more to reach the brain or the BBB, and it's also allowing a longer half-life. And we also have TWEN80 in our formulation, which could also support receptor-mediated endocytosis through the apolipoprotein receptor. So this kind of convinced us that we have good data, and we should actually try and see whether this composition works. So we have done only the in vitro study, or rather the in vitro efficacy on the Taenia solium cysts. And here you see the cyst. This is actually in the Petri dish. What I showed you earlier was a picture. So this is the invaginated state. This is the evaginated state. And then once it evaginates, this is what it happens. It keeps growing and growing. And that's how there is a lot of epilepsy and paralysis, etc., that can occur depending on how much and how fast this worm grows. It's isolated from pig meat. So you can see. And all this, the student actually went to the abattoir in Devnar, and it was quite a challenge to go there. Sometimes she needed help and support of some of the other students to go there with her, but a very bold student, most of the time she has insisted and gone there in the daytime and got the cysts. And then working with this is not very easy. And this entire study was done at Bombay Veterinary College through the kind support of Professor Gopal Barkar. The efficacy parameters evaluated were shape, motility, color, and the cyst cell wall changes. A lot of changes occurred. And this is how we did the study. We took it in microwell plates, 12 plates. And I'm just showing you some representative study. At 6 hours itself, you saw how it looked at 0 time, and see it's already changing in size, changing in shape, shrinking. And at day 4, most of them we found had literally had shriveled. Now here, very interestingly, we saw a synergistic effect of ABZSO with curcumin. So I'm not showing you all the data, but when we studied only ABZSO and only curcumin, we got some data, but when we used them together, we could go down in concentration, and significant reduction in cyst size was seen within 6 hours with some of these combinations. For instance, when ABZSO was 10 here and 10 here, within 6 hours we saw this decrease. I've circled this because this I'm seeing at much lower curcumin, 5, and here it's 10. So what we have seen is that probably curcumin also exhibits cysticidal activity. Whole range of activities of curcumin are reported, but this one is not reported. So we, for the first time, kind of proposed that curcumin could also be a cysticidal and very useful. So we used it for anti-inflammatory activity, but we seem to be seeing cysticidal activity. So that is the physical morphology and the shrinking, etc. But a biochemical test which is also carried out is the alkaline phosphatase estimation, because alkaline phosphatase inhibition occurs in presence of drugs. So here what we are seeing is the ALP units per liter and the different formulations that we have studied. Now what do these 5 bars represent? They represent time points ranging from 6, 24, 48, 72 and 96 hours. So in day 1 it's 6, then 1, 2, 3, 4 days. That's what we are seeing. And if you look at this, I have highlighted here, we are seeing complete ALP inhibition at 96 hours with ABZSO curcumin 10:10 nanogram per ml, while the individual NEs did not show complete inhibition. And this is the ABZSO curcumin 10:10. And why do we say complete inhibition? Because from this point onwards, I see only 4 bars. The 5th bar at 96 hours is totally missing. So I'm not seeing any ALP generated. And this was actually confirmed also because we could see that the cysts had totally lost their motility and were dead in those wells. So this was virtually confirmed by C. So you have lot of changes, but just to give you an insight, this is one picture I'm showing you, that there are a lot of changes that occur in the parenchyma. So this is the disturbed or disintegrated parenchyma vis-a-vis an intact compact parenchyma. So you can see these are the kind of disturbances that occur in the cyst with the help of the drugs. And plus all other kind of changes, which I am for want of time not taking you through all that. And to ensure that it is safe, we just had a safety pharmacology study. Of course, this is not such intensive safety pharmacology, but we have done the subacute toxicity at the end of 14 days. So this is repeated 14-day administration. And these are sections of the brain which reveal no changes, and the data is interpreted by a proper histopathologist. We've also done the nasal toxicity. So we have a positive control here. We have the vehicle control, we have blank DHA-ME, and we have ABZSO, curcumin DHA-ME. And what we see is, we don't see, at 7 days and 14 days, we are not seeing any changes with the MEs, with both the blank or the DHA-ME. We are not seeing any changes. So this tells us that while the positive control is showing some changes, as you can see here, now again, interpreted by a histopathologist. So what I present to you is that ABZSO, curcumin DHA-ME is a promising drug delivery system for NCC, and DHA-ME is a platform DDS for enhanced brain targeting. Now, I would just like to emphasize one point here. Now, we have not done the in vivo study, and because we didn't do the in vivo study, it was a huge challenge for us to get this published, because they said, what is the basis? So we then looked at our data, and what we saw is the data that I show here shows you a level at 10 and 10. And when we look at our brain uptake data, we are seeing levels that are 100-fold higher than this. So based on the fact that the concentration in the brain is 100-fold higher than the activity concentration seen in vitro, we said we would like to confirm that there is a good promise of activity, and that's how we got this paper accepted. This paper got accepted in a very good journal, the European Journal of Pharmaceutics and Biopharmaceutics, and as the intranasal microemulsion for targeted nose-to-brain delivery. As I come to the end of my lecture, I would just like to present to you the institute that I come from, Institute of Chemical Technology, Mumbai, known earlier as UDCT, and has transformed in 2008 into a full deemed university. And we are no more linked to Mumbai University. So this is our campus in Mumbai. The old heritage stone building still stands tall. And we have now expanded to 2 other campuses, a campus in Bhubaneswar, Odisha, and a campus in Marathwada, Jalna. So ICT is growing and growing in strength and in research. This is my research group. A huge thanks to all these students here and all the students who have passed out also. The entire work in the lab is thanks to the vibrancy the students bring in, the passion, the motivation, the excitement. So huge, huge thanks to all my students, and I know one of my students is here, Dr. Anil Jindal. I'm not sure whether anybody else is here right now. And the group, we have published 2 books, and this particular book, every chapter has 3 to 4 students in this co-authoring the books with faculty. And I am very happy to say that in this book, we also have a chapter by a Pilani faculty and student, that is Dr. Anil Jindal and his student. So targeted drug delivery is an area of very aggressive research of our lab. As you see, I presented 1 in targeted delivery, but what we focus on is simplicity, yet important scientific value addition and technology that is likely to work and be so simple that it can be very easily scaled up and translated. So that is the focus of our lab. And with that, thank you very much for this invitation, and I'm happy to take questions.
So the session is open for questions. If anyone has any question, please ask.
Professor Devarajan, it was an
Yes.
excellent talk. Means I really enjoyed the whole theme and your students' work, and all the best, and congratulations to your student. I just have one small query, you can say. But what is your opinion regarding this very small size? Because the particles that you prepared, your student has prepared there, I think you said 20 nanometer, right?
Yes, yes.
So what is your take that because of that small size their nasal uptake is so high, or because of the composition?
It is certainly because of the composition, not just the size. Size is one factor, but we have shown very clearly that the oil, now in any microemulsion system, the oil component plays a very, very important role in bioenhancement. So here we believe it is a DHA which is playing an important role, because when we removed the DHA, we certainly saw a difference. Okay, we are now working on trying to increase the DHA and see whether we can microemulsify to that smaller size, because size is also very critical to enable long circulation. Because unless there is long circulation, it's not going to be coming to the brain if I am looking at a delivery other than nasal, so which is IV. Because the current therapy is oral, and in worst case conditions, they give steroids IV. They're still not able to give ABZSO by the IV route. Albendazole, because we all know albendazole is a very poorly soluble drug, so it cannot be given by the IV route. So we were looking also at IV because we want something that will show promise better than the current therapy. But nasal is showing great excitement, but that one worry is there that if I go on administering nasal, how long can my nasal mucosa tolerate something? You know, because in a microemulsion, we have put some tween also, surfactant, which is very important component to stabilize that. So therefore, we've also looked at intravenous. So size, therefore, is very, very critical.
Yeah. Completely agree. Yes, ma'am.
We can take one more question if there is any.
I'm audible. Hello.
Yes, Kedar, please.
Ma'am, actually, I wanted to ask a question here that if you wanted to target this cyst by selective killing of this species, then how the should be explored by selective killing that? I just wanted to.
I'm not able to hear clearly.
Kedar, we cannot hear you. Can you write in a chat box? In this chat box?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Ma'am, actually, I wanted to ask if we want to target this Taenia solium cyst effectively, and we want to selectively kill this parasite. If we can explore any approach for this.
Any approach?
Rather than means selectively parasite or selectively killing of this cyst. Can we do this by any approach, or like I just wanted to?
No. This is one. See, basically,
like
this
any receptor present on the.
See, neurocysticercosis is in the brain. Okay. So you are talking of delivering to the brain and then having something that will target a receptor on the cysticercus membrane. To be frank, that membrane, in fact, I told you it's a neglected disease. There's very little information available. So I am not aware of any receptors present on that. But yes, if there is a receptor, that could certainly help.
Yeah, ma'am, there is another question by Professor Batista. He's asking, how did you dissolve your formulation before nasal or IV route?
How did you?
Dissolve your formulation before nasal or IV route.
See, for nasal, it was directly administered. The viscosity was such that it could be administered. And for IV, we diluted it with phosphate buffer. And since it's a microemulsion formulation, it withstands dilution without much change in size. So we could dilute it and then administer. In fact, we characterized after dilution, etc. before we did that, but I have not presented that routine data.
So, ma'am, if you see the chat box, he has asked, like PBS, is it dissolving in PBS?
Yeah, it is miscible. No, microemulsions and OW microemulsion will easily be diluted by water. It's an OW microemulsion, where the oil phase is Capmol DHA, then we have surfactants, and then we have a water phase. So that is easily, microemulsions OW are known to be easily diluted, and normally they should withstand 1:1 at least 100 dilution.
So thank you, ma'am. We will close the session here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.